Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar. We are taking a look at Avatar and we're working our way through Korra at the moment. We're in the third book change and we're on the 9th episode, otherwise known as the Stakeout. For those who do not recall, this is the episode in which Korra and Team Avatar are looking to track down Aiwei because they're hoping he'll lead them to Zahir. They eventually track him down to sort of an Earth Kingdom sort of town where he's staying in a hotel. They're about to, go in all guns a-blazing when Mako very wisely is like, well, wait a minute, we want Zahir. Let's just follow Aiwei to his meeting with Zahir. They stake him out, but it turns out, several games of Pai Sho later, it turns out that the reason he's not left his apartment is because he's not physically meeting Zahir, he's meeting him in the spirit world. Korra spirits through and has a conversation with Zahir, while Zahir secretly communicates with the rest of the Red Lotus to go kidnap the Avatar. They successfully manage to they beat the living daylights out of poor Bolin and Mako, and Asami, who was escaping with Korra's body while she's talking to Zahir, gets trapped by a bunch of rocks. You suspect, you believe, Chris. Oh, it's a big old trick. I don't want to spoil it. It's a big old trick, Chris. You think Zahir got Korra? Turns out it's the bloody queen. The Earth Queen got her. So we got.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that.
Go on, sorry.
I can't work out if you're being sarcastic. I thought that twist played out brilliantly.
No, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm great twist. Didn't see it coming. Very, very good.
Yeah,
very satisfying. So yeah, that's pretty much the content of the episode. I think it goes without saying. I think, as has been the rule of thumb this series, this is a good episode. It's been a strong series so far. How did you feel about this one in general, sort of overall?
You know what, Dan? I blimmin' loved it. I thought it was great. Like, sincerely, I thought the answers were satisfying. I thought, I told you it'd be called the Red Lotus, didn't I? Predicted that. Nailed it.
Did call,
like, boom.
You did call that. Yeah.
I thought the fact that it was related to Unalaq,
yep.
You know what I mean. Unalaq, I thought was brilliant. I was like, it's all tied together. That's fantastic. Like that makes a shitload of sense.
Yep.
I thought the answer of what they were looking to achieve made not only was good. But also, I mean, they say, don't they? It's the old adage. It's why Thanos was so successful. The best villain is a villain where you can kind of understand at the very least where they're coming from, and he's right. The politicians in this show have been proven historically to not be that great and be a bit dodge, and his thing of, well, let's burn the system down and see if we can find a balance between spirits and people. I thought it all made a lot of sense. I thought it was very nuanced. So much so I might have even interpreted it wrong, but that's as far as I could tell what was happening. I didn't have time to.
I think you got it.
Yeah. I thought the fight scenes were great. In particular, the use of the swimming pool I thought was particularly fun and effective. And the fact when he's like, every time, the notion that earthbending was actually giving the fire dude the chance to, give them weapons. Mm-hmm. I thought was great. I loved it all, mate. I genuinely thought, as we've said, the twist. There's two twists. The twist of it being the spirit world where they were meeting, great. The twist of it actually being the Earth Queen that's caught them, great. All roads point to Ba Sing Sang. It ties everything together. Like I've been saying, we got the spirit world thing, which we've just sort of left, but the kind of political nightmare of the spirit world and the city, like, and how's that all tying? Well, now there's an answer to that question. And it was also the Red Lotus was started by an airbender. So there's some stuff there to tie us into kind of airbending and the new airbenders and all that sort of stuff. Honestly, can't praise it enough, Dan. Loved it. Thought it was great.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is like a really, really great like set up for for what's going on sort of situation, because it does tie a neat bow on many of the themes and ideas that this season has been presenting that have seemed disparate and unconnected. And I think it does it in a initially subtle way, because when you think about what happens when they arrive at the town, when they get there, immediately we're reminded that the Earth Queen is after them because there are wanted posters. And then as they move around the Earth Kingdom town, spirits keep sort of popping up in odd places, sort of reminding you of that situation also. And then when we do, once we, while we're doing the stakeout, we're sort of in the, betrayal at Zaofu stuff, because we're talking about Ai Wei and his links to Zahir directly. And then when you get to talk to Zahir, who is such a compelling villain, like he's so nuanced in his writing compared to some of the more like mustache twirly villains this specific show, as in Korra, has had. I do think Avatar, generally speaking, with the exception of Zahir, and we'll see about season 4, but like in terms of like where we're up to in Korra right now, Zahir is the only villain from Korra that stands up to any of the villains from Avatar, I think, reasonably well. The rest, mixed bag, I would say. Even the ones that are leaning towards good have elements of them that don't quite work. So it's fully mixed. But then we get Korra sort of sitting down and talking to Zahir. In that moment when he's like, yeah, that's fine, I'm going to answer your questions, take a seat. Like, it's actually quite surprising. You don't expect him to do it. You assume he's going to be like, Korra, you'll never know my plan. As some of the previous villains might have. And then when you get the answers, it is very satisfying, because it does bring together a lot of the stuff we've been talking about all season and turns it from 3 or 4 separate plots into one very, very clear one. Zahir, as you pointed out, I wrote some of this dialogue down, but like we'll go through it in more detail. This idea of the natural order is disorder, and the only way to really fix such a broken system, and Guru Lahima clearly agreed, was that to fix these systems, you can't just adjust them. You need to break them down. I mean, he's sort of a nihilist, but like a very specific Avatar like world version of a nihilist. He's it doesn't quite 100% fit with like our world nihilism, but it ain't too far away. It's kind of a nihilism adjacent, his whole idea. And I think, he sort of says, like, the idea of these nations and governments, that's the problem. And, true freedom can only be achieved with those governments broken down. And he praises Korra for her choice to let the spirits go and take a step towards balance. And you start to wonder if maybe part of the plan is just convincing Korra that he's right, getting her on side. Like... what a genius thing for a villain to do. Why fight when he could use his sort of wisdom and his sort of... He's quite charismatic, I find, Zahir, even though he's kind of stoic. There is something very charismatic. You feel he's sort of drawn in when he's talking, I think, and you do really listen. So I feel like using some of his sort of natural, subtle charisma to try and win Korra around almost... he's still going to go ahead and like capture her because he needs her on. He needs her off the board and in his control. Like he's still after her no matter what she says or does. But the notion that he's not outside of the responsibility that he thinks he can convince her otherwise, because his mission is to restore balance. She's already taken a big stride in doing that by allowing the spirit worlds and the natural world, the physical world, to come together. So yeah, I don't know. I just think an episode like this that gets to do fun, stakeout, joyous stuff in the beginning, a big action sequence in the middle, and then a bunch of really great world building and like tying all the plots together stuff at the end, and then throws a really great twist on it with the Earth Queen having been the one that captured Korra, even though you assume otherwise as you're watching the episode. It's pretty much a masterpiece. Like it's as good as this show's gotten, and it is incredible how well this is all put together. So yeah, if we're doing overall stuff, I mean, it's just knocked out of the park, this episode. I only have one criticism of this whole episode, but we'll come to that. I'll save that for later because I don't want to get us off the positivity train, Chris. Not so early anyway. Let's not stop at not sure about that, but we'll see where it goes junction.
Well, I'll tell you what. That criticism better not be the town people loving Marco and treating him like a celebrity. We've not mentioned that yet, but that's
yes, Bolin, not Marco, but yes, 100%.
Sorry.
Like Chris has, even though it's 50-50, Chris has pretty much 100% failure rate on just deciphering between Marco and Bolin's names. It's incredible.
Yeah,
it's like you'd say that statistically speaking you would be 50-50, but you just seem to get it wrong about 80-90% of the time. It's amazing. Yeah. But yes, that's one of my favourite things about this episode. So for those who don't remember, that they're being followed around and they think it's people for the Earth Queen hunting them down, but it turns out they're actual Nuktuk fans, and they have a Nuktuk plushie that looks like a Funko Pop, and they want him to sign stuff. It's my favourite. I love it so much. Yeah, because that's the thing. It's a funny episode for a good chunk too. It's easy to forget.
I think what I like about the Nuktuk stuff is like it's easy to forget. It did work. He was a big star in Series 3. You know what I mean? There were whole cinemas or theatres full of people watching him. It
Right.
does make sense to sort of reference that and pretend that just didn't. That you know what I mean? It's kind of like, it just makes sense that would get referenced and stuff.
Right.
It's kind of how Friends sort of forgot that Joey was in a soap opera unless it was convenient. Like,
Yes.
You don't want to. Well, I suppose this has kind of done the same thing as it's now convenient here and hasn't come up since. But although to be fair, we've not really seen him interact with many people. This is probably amongst the first times he's sort of interacting with the public. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. I thought it made complete sense.
Yeah, and I think he's brought it up a couple of times, but like with people who are just like, what are you talking about? Yeah, it's this is a good moment. It's a really fun moment, and again, this episode's got like a couple of small little surprise turns that it takes, as well as the bigger ones, and that's one of the smaller ones because obviously that you do genuinely, you don't have any reason to doubt these people work for the Earth Queen and they're after them. So when they do that little rug pull for that joke, it's great. So let's. I'm looking at a dialogue I've written, and I'm like, why did I write that sentence down? What is that in reference to? I watched this last night from my perspective, so I'm having a moment here of like, I wrote a note and I'm like, why? Ting Ting always finds his man. What's that in reference to?
That's Oh, you got me worried now. Who was Nuktuk?
No, Bolin.
Bolin. That's Bolin's. That's Bolin's alternative identity.
Yes.
That's his cover-up identity for when they're going into town and they're having to pretend to be other people. And as he's walking off, he's like, Ting Ting always gets his man. It's really funny.
That's great. Yes, as soon as you started saying it, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. So for those who don't recall, Bolin gets really into Marco's being a police officer stuff, like doing the stakeouts, all that jazz. And he decides that they need, because they don't want to get caught by the Earth Queen, they need, identities. And yes, that's right. He creates this character who's like a rough cop that doesn't play by the rules or whatever. And that's right. He always finds his man. That's a great. I wrote that down and didn't add context, so I was just staring at those words like, what the fuck is that to do? Speaking of moments in this episode that are funny, I would like to highlight the moment about Pai Show, where Bolin's like, Korra, you should really, you're the Avatar, standardize these Pai Show rules. And she's like, yeah, I'll add that to my to-do list, along with reviving the Air Nation, stopping Zahir,
And he's like, thank you very much.
Yeah. It's a really good, it's just, I don't know, it's a really funny moment. This episode's got tons of those though. It's a really amusing episode. There's tons of great jokes. There's a little Shady Shin reference. Shady Shin being like one of the guys with the triple threat triads that they used to sort of work for when they were getting themselves into trouble. Those two, because he's the one who taught Bolin how to play Pai Sho, or and while they're doing the stakeout, Asami and Bolin play in what Bolin comically refers to as a Pai Showdown, which I really enjoy. I like that Asami got to do something this week and say things other than just "What's that over there?" and "Oh, look, this." She gets to talk about Pai Sho, her perspective on it, which is like it's a slow, methodical game, whereas Bolin believes it's a game of like speed and chance, which makes perfect sense that those two characters would play it in those two ways. It says a lot about them. But yeah, all really good stuff. I wrote down a bunch. You know what? I'm looking through my notes. A lot of my notes are just about good jokes. Like the joke when they meet the guy, and he's like, they're like looking for Aiwei, and Aiwei says, "Oh no, Aiwei, sorry." The guy says, I think I saw that guy. I told him I had the best drinks in the city, and he told me I was lying. And then right after they have a conversation about Aiwei, he just goes, "You know what? He was right. My drinks are terrible." It's brilliant. So much. I wrote down so many of these jokes. It was a really funny episode.
It's such a funny episode. I'd forgotten. I mean, I watched it like hours ago, but so I guess I haven't forgotten. It's you reminding me. That when he looks down and he's like, and he's right. The drinks are terrible. So good.
It's brilliant. It's so good. Let's talk then about the action in more detail. So obviously, comedy tick. The plot of the episode we've already sort of broken down. Tick. Let's go into a bit more detail about some of the action sequences in this. So this has this brilliant moment. I really loved the notion of Zahir being smart enough to know that like he might not convince Korra, and not to waste any time, not to sort of like, he's got many things boiling. He's a smart guy. He communicates with the rest of the Red Lotus while talking to Korra secretly, and he tells them where they are. And you get this whole sequence where Korra's body, helpless because she's in the spirit world talking to Zahir, is being sort of taken away by Asami while Bolin and Mako defend against the two members. Although I always wondered, did they show us where the third? Where's Sparky Boob Girl gone? I don't see her anywhere.
What, when they send them?
Yeah, where does she stay with? She stay with? Was it?
Yeah,
here?
She says that's covered in dialogue. She says, "I'll stay here to look after Zahir's body."
Gotcha.
That is covered in right. Dialogue.
Okay.
She specifically instructs them to go, and specifically says she'll wait with the book to avoid anything happening to him.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense. I must have missed that line. So they go. They have the big fight with Marco and Bolin. Visually, it was stunning. I thought like this is one of the better fights. It's been a season with some really good fights as well, but I think this is one of the better, more interesting fights, both creatively but also like just visually. I don't know. I'm assuming you felt.
Do you
similarly.
think it's? Do you think it's because there's the use of? Well, yeah.
So, I put the episode on in the background so I could have the fight in front of me while we were discussing it, and forgot that the sound on my laptop was still on. So,
well, that how interested are you in what I'm saying, Dan? If immediately when I start talking, you start watching the episode on mute.
No, that's not fair. I had just the visuals in front of me while you're talking about the fight. I was making your talking commentary. Is what I was doing.
There's a great Ed Byrne bit where he talks about how he went in for an operation. And the anaesthetist recognised him and said something like, "So what's it like appearing on Mock the Week?" As they injected him with the anaesthetic to knock him out, and he was just like, "I mean, never has someone cared less about my career than to ask me the question whilst they were literally knocking me unconscious." Incredible. He was like, "Nothing says I don't give a shit about your response quite like that." Just reminded me of that gag. Thought I'd repeat it. I think it's the swimming pool. You know what I mean? They can do a lot of interesting stuff. The visuals of Bolin jumping into the water and trying to avoid the fireballs in the water. With the fact that he gets captured and gets put in this like pocket of water. I know we've seen similar things before, but I think like it's such a unique setting. Like we've seen a lot of fights in towns. We've seen a lot of fights in grandiose houses. We've never seen a fight in a motel before in Korra. At least to my memory, and I really
don't you remember Battle at the Old Motel, that episode from season 1?
I must have forgotten it.
It's a classic. Yeah. It's one of our favourites of that season, if memory serves.
I was thinking, I do, because that Heartbreak Motel or whatever it's called, that episode of Steven Universe, I really loved that as well. Maybe I like motels. Maybe, I don't know. It's it's a jam of mine. I don't know. It's my jam.
Yeah,
set in motels.
I agree. I think the contrast of like the colours as well, because obviously you've got like I love a good nighttime fight when someone's doing firebending and they have those big whooshes of light, but then you've got that visually combined. So like when Marco like does that slow motion like jump off the wall and he slices through the water arm and you get that awesome glow. But as you pointed out as well, the showing Bolin's creativity to avoid the fireballs by just diving in the water, and like then you got that visual of him in the blue water being cut through by the fireballs, and it's just it's one of those things where it's like, even if you weren't engaged with the situation and the action, like if you just turned this show on, right, and you didn't know what the story was or why these people were fighting at all, I think you'd still be reasonably well engaged, because it's just so visually sort of composed, drawn, and the colors are really interesting and the movement's really smooth. I just think it's just really well done. It has a lot of, it also has a lot of sure. Like you there are moments when you really feel like they're a bit outgunned, which hard to do, I think, because the show's done an awful lot over its runtime to make Marco and Bolin seem pretty formidable. So it's the idea that they both seem on their back foot the whole time. But they've done such a good job with these guys as bad guys, because when Marco's like, we'll fend them off, I'm like, oh, I think you're gonna struggle, lads. Right. I don't think you're winning this battle, and to the fact that I thought that shows how good a job they've done of making these guys like you say, a formidable threat. Yeah, agreed. And you know what's crazy about that fight scene is how it's visually strikingly sort of contrasted with Korra's very peaceful conversation with Zahir, which is also beautiful, but in a different way. It's like this sunset forest scene, and it's like really softly lit and really sort of tranquil, and it's got all these sort of like autumn colours. It's just a beautiful visual as well of the two of them sat cross-legged across from each other under this tree. And when you go from that to the sort of dark chaos, the sort of nighttime motel fight, I think the two things happening at once complement each other visually really well. Let's see.
What didn't you? Let's do what you didn't like. What did you like?
I was fairly irritated by, and they could come back to this and make this work, but after the setup of last week of choosing the more complicated version of Lin and Su-Yin's situation, because I talked last week, didn't I, about how they could have just had Korra defy Lin on her own, wake up the gang and be like, we're off, and then and then you've got the simple version here of Lin and Su-Yin wake up the next morning and they're like, Korra's gone, damn it, she defied us. But to have Su-Yin be the one to give Korra like the go ahead, get out of here, is like a real choice that puts a lot of tension into an already fraught relationship, because Lin and Su-Yin haven't resolved 100% of their issues, and we were very complimentary of that choice. For it to just be this week, oh, don't be over dramatic, you can't control the Avatar's every move, I can try, and then Lin walks off angrily. I'm hoping it's more than that. That would be a real wasted opportunity, I think, for some tension between the two characters. Yeah, I'd be sad if that's all that ends up being. Basically, so I was a bit like let down by that moment early in the episode when we have that conversation, because I just thought, like, if you're only going to do it in 3 or 4 lines, then I don't know why you ran it that way in the first place. Why do it that way? Well, I guess we learned a little bit about Sue's determination to find out what's going on with Ai, but I don't know if that's worth the sort of tease for action we then didn't get, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think if they're going to do more, and that's going to cause real tension, then whenever the episode is that we deal with that, they should have maybe just shown us her finding out there. Do you know what I mean? This show does have a bad habit of... It's almost like it feels a need to keep sometimes to a real timeline and a chronological series of events. And I'd have been fine with, like, her finding out in an episode further down the line, and that's when we deal with it, as opposed to it felt like it was tacked on here because chronologically it would happen the same day as the events of this episode take place. And this show does sort of do that quite a bit, doesn't it? Where it would like just do one scene of one plot. There's been less of it this year, but I think I remember us specifically complaining about that last year. And this feels a bit like that. Like, don't worry about doing that here. Like, it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think as well we could have had... I mean, if you wanted to justify that conversation not happening immediately, you could have had a scene here where Lin sort of goes to Su Yin and says, the Avatar left in the night. She's ignored our orders, and Su Yin not correcting that. And then you could then pull the trigger on Lin finding out that Sue had something to do with it later on. There's no reason to immediately do that conversation if you don't want. There's an easier way around it. So I was disappointed by that, which is considering how much this episode gets right. And let me tell you, it gets an awful lot right. That was slightly disappointing, I thought. But, it's pretty minor in the grand scheme of things because they could pull it in later. But yeah, just don't be so over dramatic. You can't control the Avatar's every move. I can try. I don't know. Because like Lin starts really angry. She's like, "You let her go? I thought we were on the same page." And you stab me in the back. I'm like, "Oh, here we're going." And then she's like, "You can't control her." She's like, "I can try." Like, I don't know. It felt, wah wah. That's a real wet fart. It wasn't great. So yeah, you're right. Like it is something this show has had a habit of doing historically. But with this season having been written so tightly, I kind of was hoping they'd be not quite playing out with that. Some of those old problems rearing their head slightly. But again, it's pretty minor in the grand scheme of what this episode does and is. So I'm going with it. It's fine. So let's talk in more detail about Zahir and the Red Lotus and the stuff that's revealed here, because we're talking about it in our overall complimenting of the episode, like the sort of summary of what we liked. But if we should probably get a little bit more into detail about the Red Lotus. So, dedicated to restoring freedom to the world. He talks about the war and how the White Lotus specifically stepped out of the shadows during the war, and they lost their way by serving not themselves but the Avatar, essentially. We know that's what happened because we saw the White Lotus were protecting at the beginning of season 1. The White Lotus were protecting and training Korra, and that did seem odd, I remember at the time. But obviously, when you know that the Red Lotus tried to kidnap Korra at a young age, you suddenly realize the White Lotus weren't always there. They were. They stepped up to protect Korra in the wake of the Red Lotus's attempt to kidnap her. Unalaq was a member. We learned that Unalaq was with them, but he sort of got away with it. I think they sort of say he wasn't present the night of the kidnapping, or he escaped the night of the kidnapping without being caught, and therefore he got to carry on But even back then, their plan was to convince the Avatar to work on harmonic convergence. So the Red Lotus's plans.
They specifically state that his plan of becoming the Dark Avatar was never part of their plan, which I thought was good to, because I don't think they needed to state that. But the fact that plan, which was more about power, I thought it was good writing to have him specifically state that wasn't part of their plan, because it shows the differences and the nuances, and just makes it really helps with that that notion of you can see where they're coming from. And I think, taking the time, taking the beat, it's only one line, but taking the beat to have him say, the Dark Avatar stuff wasn't us, was quite clever, I thought.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, particularly as well, having him sort of, talk in detail about the all of the different occasions in which, political sort of presences have had a negative effect on this world as well. So he's reinforcing his point when he talks about the political stuff as well. So you've got the on the one hand, you've got him very clearly laying out that he wanted a new world order, but then sort of saying that while they started with Unalaq, they separated, and because Unalaq essentially, by becoming a Dark Avatar, was becoming a power onto himself. He was becoming, he wanted power, and he was being selfish essentially, which separates him from the Red Lotus, who are more about disbanding these functions of government. And then we get this brilliant stuff where he just very eloquently and very quickly lays out all the ways in which the world of Avatar have demonstrated that these governmental systems don't work at all. Going from more recent examples like the Earth Queen to historical examples such as the events of The Last Airbender with the Fire Nation, so it's, bringing chaos and misery to many. So yeah, it is really interesting to sort of lay out that branching paths of where these villains came from the same place but ended up in different places, and what the differences are between their goals. It seemed Unalaq was less interested, and I guess that makes sense because Unalaq, by the time he meets Korra as a sort of young adult in season 2, Unalaq is part of a governmental system. He's part of that chieftain system that the Earth the War Tribe has. He would be very much something Zahir would want to tear down, and it seems like Unalaq really just wanted power a lot of the time. So he by that point he diverged from the Red Lotus. He seems to have gone quite far. They don't seem very close to each other anymore, which I think that's really interesting also.
Yeah, agreed. I think it makes a whole lot of sense. Like I say, I'm glad that dialogue was in there. Do you? Well, no, I know you agree because you said earlier you thought it was the best villain the show's had so far. So you agree with that sort of just how powerful that, for a shorthand, Thanos idea of you understanding their ideal, you understanding where they come from, is to the audience. Do you think that was something? Do they, well, either, depending on how you answer, is that something they play with, or when you watch this the first time, because I think all shorthand aside, Thanos really did show how powerful that was in particular. That's probably the biggest example of an audience going, yeah, no, I mean, I can see where he's coming from. He's got a bit of a point, there's no need to be a dick about it, he's killing people, and all, half the universe is dusted. Spoilers. In a pre-Thanos world, did that notion really strike you to your memory watching this the first time? Was that something is it something I've latched onto because of seeing it done badly in comic book movies and seeing Thanos do it so well? Is it a notion that you enjoyed about this character and storyline when you watched this the first time?
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, and I guess that there's a version of like this where I like take some time to like, look back through the history of that idea of the villain with a point. I mean, we talked about it in the first season of this show before it was revealed to have all been a bit of a power ploy. Amon in season 1 of this show had a point. He was sort of saying that society was in this world lent too much towards the Benders. They had too much power. They had too much influence in the world. The governments were run by Benders. Like people in power, a lot of the people in power were Benders, and they oppressed the non-Benders. And you sort of went, yeah, he's got a point. So it's not even the first time this show has necessarily done that. I mean, it's worth noting that the original Avatar definitely didn't really do that because the Phoenix King, Fire Lord Ozai, he clearly was set up as an unreasonable villain. He was a man who wanted power and used the excuse of, I would very much like to go out and spread the Fire Nation's prosperity to the world, which is a very thin, not at all believable excuse for him to do a power grab. So when you get to Korra, and the first villain we have is a villain with a point, for lack of a better term for this kind of villain, you sort of know this show is going to start doing some more complex stuff with their villains, to varying levels of success. Because the problem with Amon is at the end of that season, when you reveal that actually he's just sort of a liar and a power grabber of his own, and he is himself a bender abusing his power, it undercuts that whole villain with a point thing. I don't think it massively hurts the season, because you sort of doing that whole villain with a point thing is how he amassed his followers. So you sort of it still serves a purpose. It explains how he got his cronies, his whole equalist movement. With Zahir, it's really interesting because he doesn't seem to be too interested with expanding the Red Lotus. He's not. He's going about. He really believes it. Like he truly believes. Because if he was like Amon and was doing power grabby stuff, he'd be going around saying to everyone, "We're going to break down the systems of government. Join me. Give me power. Give me influence by being on our side." But instead, he's working as the White Lotus originally did, from the shadows, to dismantle these governmental systems and bring that balance / chaos back to the world. So you really know he believes it, which does set him apart from previous villains that have done this. Whether I picked up on any of that when I was watching it initially, probably not. I'm going to assume that I understood Zahir was a compelling villain, but I probably never stopped to break it down in the terms of, oh, it's because he has a point. Like, the show has got me to agree with him. He's going about it the wrong way, but I agree with him. I probably didn't break it down in those terms when I was watching it initially, but I definitely found myself drawn to him and compelled by him on my initial watch. He might be my favourite villain of Korra, full stop, which is potential. Well, why do we rewatch season 4, I guess, and see how that plays out? I don't want to give away where 4 goes or anything, but this show has had a villain per season so far, so I don't think it'll surprise anyone to know that there are other forces involved in what the story of season 4 is. So maybe until I've rewatched 4, it's a bold statement, but certainly to my memory, and so far is being proved correctly, Zahir is one of the more interesting villains of this show. Probably the best of Korra for sure. And I don't think I will have necessarily picked up on why he worked or what was interesting about him in great detail if I wasn't stopping after each episode to review it for an hour. So it is a different scenario we're in now. But I mean, I reckon there's probably a pretty good history of villains with a point. I think Thanos sort of was a clean, really great pop culture moment where a lot of people realized that's a really good way to make a villain. But I think it was a trope used long before that actually occurred. The whole villain he's right, he's just going about it in a horrible way that's either causing a lot of suffering or a lot of issues.
It's interesting, isn't it, the villains in Korra, because I'm changing the topic slightly. You'd finished your point.
No, that was I wound down. You're good.
Because in Avatar, they've really done a good job. I can't quite remember the what series one built to. So correct me if I'm wrong in saying this, which I might be. But I feel like Avatar, because it was the Fire Lord and old Zuki-Poos, and even series one, I can't remember the villain of series one's name, but it was basically people with. My point is, it was armies v armies. There was people with these supporters and these armies doing battle and going to fight. And with this show, because I was thinking, the reason I got here is because I was thinking about how the exciting thing about this villain is you got 4 people that actually kind of don't want to fight unless the fight is brought to them. So I was kind of like, oh, that's a really interesting take on it. And then I've kind of realised that actually, comparatively to Avatar, it feels like the writers of Korra have made a real conscious effort to avoid armies, to avoid similar sort of conclusions or similar sort of finales to Avatar, which obviously had a lot of, and obviously a big spine of Avatar was the War of the Nations and everyone being against the Fire Nation. So obviously that lends itself to that. So I know why it's different, but it does feel like a conscious effort. This show could have easily, and I don't know if we've particularly given Korra props for it before, but we might have done. But I like that I've realised in this moment how much Korra didn't go, fuck it then, we'll just come up with another nation to fight each other. I mean, arguably, that's what this season's slightly building to with the Earth Kingdom stuff. But do you know what I mean? Like, if you think about the finales, they really have been different they've built to different places and more one-on-one places than Avatar did. And I think actually that's quite, fair play to them, because that's such a part of the iconography of Avatar that they could have easily just found an excuse to have a team go up against an army, like they did a lot in Avatar. That was a bit rambly, because I'm sort of, I was sort of saying it as I was thinking it, but do you know what I mean?
No, 100% I do, and I think you're right. I think because even in the first season of this show, when they called for help from the Republic armies, they had a whole thing of, well, they can't really send you an army, so you're just getting like one little fleet, and it was basically the boat with Zuko's grandson on it, whose name I've forgotten. Oh, he was called Iroh, General Iroh. That's right. He was named after Uncle Iroh. So yeah, we got one very small battalion, which allowed us to have a bit more of scale to the end fight, but it was still quite a direct and personal one. It was Korra, Amon, and it was like, there were a couple of boats and a couple of ships involved, but it wasn't like army v army in the grand scale that we got during Last Airbender. And I think, there's an element of deliberate choice to do something different, more direct, more personal, but also I think there's probably sometimes going to be a budgetary reason for that with the show. Which we'll come to, but I do like it as a choice. I do think it works really well. And I also think, Chris, that maybe I think this week of all weeks you could probably get away with not with being wildly rambly and it being okay, because I've been very rambly. So I've taken an hour to get to almost all of my points so far. So
fair. Well, what are some of your other points? What are some of your notes?
Yeah, little notes. Korra's relationship with Naga continues to actually be really well characterized this year. I really liked when she was like, "Thank you for getting us here. I forgot to bring you some treats," and Naga's like annoyed at her. Like, it's just little moments like that really help build up their relationship. I really liked that, especially compared to like previous seasons where Naga's existence was just to be ridden without really any. I don't know. Yeah, just. Sorry, I'm just checking they're taking our bins. 1 second. Yeah. They're taking our bins. Sorry, we were told to put the bins out 2 nights ago, and then they didn't take them. And you come out, and it's probably quite loud, and you can probably hear it on the thing. But the bin trucks here. No one gets out and rolls the bin up to the truck or anything. And like an arm comes out of the truck, grabs the bin, and tips it in. It's brilliant.
That's cool.
Yeah, like a little robot arm comes out the side of the bin truck. Anyway,
I just realised just while you're doing your notes, I had another thought whilst watching that I wanted to check with you. We've seen the Fog of Souls, right? Where the guy who turned their back on him has fallen into. Because I'm right in saying Tenzin went into it when looking for his daughter, and they bumped into the guy who was the villain of Series 1 of Avatar. That's correct. Is my memory right in all of that?
You are exactly correct. It's in my notes. I was I'm glad you brought it up because it is one of the last big things we haven't really discussed. That is Ai Wei's fate. So Zahir basically says to Ai Wei, there's a loose end, and Ai Wei's like, no, I swear I tied everything up. He's like, no, you're the loose end. And Zahir demonstrates some pretty scary abilities in the spirit world, where he sort of like Nightcrawler from X-Men poofs. He grabs onto Ai Wei, like sort of pops out of thin air, reappears on a cliff top over the Fog of Lost Souls, dumps Ai Wei's soul in it, and then off he goes, like back to Korra. It's brutal, and it is, when you get lost in the Fog of Lost Souls, you are theoretically there for eternity. Tenzin managed to retrieve Jinora, I think, because he got there really early. Like, was that the whole thing? I can't remember the exact nature of it, but yeah, Tenzin absolutely, saved Jinora from that fate in season 2, and we did get that glimpse of the general from the first season of Avatar. That was a real sort of knobhead of the week sort of character that we never. He didn't get. I don't think he ever got officially added to the to the knobhead Hall of Fame. But he was pretty close. He's the guy that kidnapped the fish and made the sun go away. The moon go away. So so that guy. Yeah. He was there last season. So yeah, it's nice to see the Fog of Lost Souls return. That was a really cool solution. I mean, does that just mean Ai Wei's body is basically just gonna stay sort of in that coma almost forever? And then just rot away? Like, I guess we're not dealing with that. I guess the show isn't going to address that element because
it's interesting though. But that does it's interesting though because that does add jeopardy to sort of the spirit world and spirit states, doesn't it? Because obviously we talked before. I think we've already talked about this, but I was just reminded of it again. We talked about this in an earlier episode of this show. But when they moved Korra's body, I was just reminded again, like, of how big a thing that was as a plot point in Avatar.
That was actually going to be related to my feedback from this series, aka give me that feedback. Do you want to slip that into the body of the episode this week, Chris?
Let's do it, Dan. Give me the feedback for my bowl. I want to have a bowl of feedback. Shit. Whoa. Give me the feedback.
These get better every week. That's my new favourite. Brilliant. So, we have a comment from Hudson Strange. Hudson Stange? I think it actually says Hudson Stange, which is 6767 on one of our videos. Specifically covering this, because we had this question last year also. When people were going in and out of the spirit world in the different ways, there was an episode, I think, when Jinora meditated and visited the spirit world and they moved her body, and we were like, this was a big deal in season 1 of Avatar. And I've actually got the line of dialogue. Katara says, he's crossing into the spirit world. He'll be fine as long as we don't move his body. That's his way back to the physical world. That's what Katara says in season 1 of Last Airbender. In that final episode, or second to last episode, the Siege of the North, part 1. And then the big sort of tension of that is that in the end, Zuko grabs him and removes his body, so he's arguably trapped, separate from his body, his spirit and his body separated. So someone, one of our comments, so Hudson Stange says, I have an explanation for the whole thing where you're not supposed to move someone's body, which is that I think people who said that in Avatar The Last Airbender probably didn't know really what happens in the spirit world or the sort of in-between place. So they probably just thought that was what was happening when people didn't return from the spirit world. It's possible that what actually was happening was they died or got lost in the fog of lost souls, and they never returned, and people assumed it was because they'd moved their bodies. That could absolutely cover it. I actually think the solution might be slightly simpler. Now, this is a bit fansplainy, Chris, but bear with me. I don't think Aang fully goes to the spirit world in season 1. We see him at the Spirit Oasis. Then we see like a sort of blue spectral spirit version of Aang sort of step out from his body, separate from his body, and then run around in the physical world. That is not the same as going to the spirit world, which is a different place with a different layout. You know, Korra goes to the spirit world. She's under a tree with Zahir. You know, she's not in the same location, but the spirit world version of it. Aang is in that spirit oasis and then wanders off. So I think what Aang was doing wasn't fully visiting the spirit world. I think Aang was visiting a sort of in-between world where the spirit world and the physical world overlap. And I think when you do that,
That's interesting.
You have to find your body to get back. But if you fully go into the spirit world, you can then come back to your body wherever it is, because those two link. There's no physical link anyway, because you're fully in the spirit world.
Yeah, it's true, because we don't have that sort of force ghost blue light, do we, in this show? So that does make sense. Yeah.
That's my interpretation of it, but I really like the comment we got about it, and I think I think you could also absolutely. You know, as was suggested by Hudson Stange, like the other idea being, I think it's possible that the reason people assumed that is because sometimes people just wouldn't come back from the spirit world, and you know, accidentally attributing that to, we moved their body, maybe that's why they couldn't get back. You know, people do build up myths and rules around things based on what they observe. It's very common for, you know, superstitions often are built from like, you know, some guy broke a mirror sometime and then had a bunch of bad luck and went, that's definitely because I broke that mirror. Do you know what I mean? Like, I observed it. You know, it's anecdotal evidence, but it becomes law at some point. So I could also see that being the explanation too. But the more I thought about it and the more I looked into it, I do think what Aang was doing in season 1 is different to what Korra and Jinora have been doing here in this show, which is fully visiting the spirit world, actually like going to that different place, rather than this sort of overlap that Aang would go, where he sort of had one foot in each, which I guess would require you to be able to need to know where your body is to get back to. That kind of makes a certain amount of sense that you need to be more physically tethered to doing what Aang was doing than fully putting your consciousness, your spirit, into the spirit world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that works as an explanation too. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it came up, and I thought this was the episode to bring it up. I sort of stored it for that because I remembered this episode and I remember having that thought when I watched it originally. So when we got that comment, I was like, perfect. Gonna back that one into my notes.
Yeah, that works.
On that topic though of the spirit world, did you like all the spirit stuff this week? Like, there's the spirits. Like, I particularly enjoyed the moment where the spirits are trying to help Korra figure it out. They're like, I wonder where this place is, and they all like show up over the map, like basically waving at her like it's in the spirit world. Think that, you know, I liked they were being helpful, that they sort of understood what was going on.
I loved that. That was my favourite element of it. That and the conversation as a whole, just it being so gentle, like you say, him being like, "I'll answer any questions, go for it," made me excited as a viewer because I'm like, the villain never just exposition dumps unless it's, you know, James Bond in the final act. I want that. I've got questions. So yeah, I loved all the spirit world stuff. I thought it was a really, also just a really. An example, you know, I think I used this phrase last week. We talk about it in the context of twists, but basically saying, you know, the ideal twist is something where you go, oh, that's so logical, you know, but it's still a surprise. And I love here that it's like the villains meeting in the spirit world in this instance just makes you go, oh, why haven't we seen that before? That makes such sense. That's such a cool idea.
Yeah, where they
great.
can't
Really
actually
enjoyed it.
like fight anyway because neither of them have their bending.
Yeah, and I loved it when he said that. I was like, neither of us can bend. I've got time. Yeah, I really enjoyed the spirit world stuff. You?
Yeah. Yeah, I did too. I really liked the way they set it up as well throughout the episode with like the spirits in the real world stuff. That was kind of what I was getting at because I think like, you know, we talked at the beginning of the season about what are the impacts of Korra opening up these worlds to each other, and just seeing spirits knocking about in the Earth Kingdom, flying about, and like when she's trying to figure out where the meeting is happening and the spirits are on the map, giving her a little nudge, trying to tell her where the meeting is happening, and she doesn't figure it out. But I like them the way they're sort of aware of what's happening and giving her hints and like the spirits are just interesting figures in this show in general, and I really like the way they've done that. I don't know. I just thought seeing them like there's that great shot of like Bolin in the town itself, and like a random jar just grows some spirit legs and walks off. It's like, oh yeah, spirits are just everywhere now. We're just carrying that on, and they seem to be spreading more and more each episode. We're getting more glimpses of spirits out in the places they arguably wouldn't have been previously, and I just think that's really fun.
Yeah, same. I thought it was really good.
Yeah. Any other notes? Let's see. Asami is helpful in this episode. She finds a clue. She's the one who finds the clue that indicates that there'll be a meeting. I thought that was good. Again, good to have her just, doing something. We've covered all of this stuff. Let's talk about the final reveal then. So yeah, they do the brilliant thing of Korra gets trapped, and you go, oh, they got her the body, and then she wakes up and she's in sort of a Hannibal Lecter style like gag and thing, and she's like, what happened? Did the Red Lotus get us? And Asami's like, who are the Red Lotus? The Earth Queen got us. Like, really great moment, really edited brilliantly. Like, you really don't see it coming. I know, I sort of like make that jokey tone at the beginning. I didn't mean that to imply that I thought the twist didn't work. I was just being like sort of goofy about it. But like, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, you genuinely don't see it coming. It's a real surprise. Even this second time or third time I'm watching it, because I've seen this series a couple of times, but I was still like, oh yeah, that's what that is. It's the Earth Queen. Like, yeah, of course. Like, I almost forgot and then got re-surprised by it. Like, how it was as it was happening, it sort of came to me, but like, yeah, there's a real moment of, oh yeah, that's what this is. So it still works even on a reviewing. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we have anything else to say other than just that we liked that. But I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
Just that I really liked the. I don't know why. I think just because it felt so real, and it's really simple dialogue, but it really shows how the writing has been stronger this year. It's, her saying, the Red Lotus has got us, and Asami going, who are the Red Lotus? Because, of course, she wouldn't know. She's had that conversation privately in the spirit world. But just, I don't know what it is that I like so much about that dialogue. I think it's because it makes the audience react. It makes the audience go, no, she wouldn't know about that because she's been in the spirit world, like I've just said. And I just think it shows how much stronger the writing is this year. Just the little moments like that feel so real, because that is what would happen. She would blurt that out. Asami would say that back. Like, yeah, I thought that was I don't know, it almost inconsequential on paper, but for me a reflection of the strength of the writing this year.
Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree. So with that all in mind then, Chris, is it time?
Let's do it. Let's trim it up.
We're going to give you some trivia. So, let's talk about production a little bit. Let's talk about what in the world happened here. So this episode, as people will know from last week, but if you're tuning in, joining us this week, hi, lovely to have you. Interesting episode to choose to jump in on. I guess you just really wanted to hear us talk about Zahir, I guess. I don't know why someone would jump in here, but you have done. Lovely. This episode was scheduled to air on Nickelodeon, as all the others of this season had done, on the 25th of July, 2014. But the show, between the last episode airing and this one, they decided to pull it from its television airing a week ahead and instead just put it up digitally. Now, a month or two later, they did air this episode on television, but its release was purely via nick.com. Last week, I remember saying that it's strange because it looks like then this season finishes and almost goes immediately into season 4, television-wise. I double-checked. There's a month gap. There's 4 weeks where it doesn't air. It looked like it went straight into it when I was glancing at it last week, but having now had time to research it properly, there was a month between the two. So this is what I think. This is my timeline of events. This is what I think occurred. So the show announced, lots of excitement, season 1 on the horizon. The writers, the creative team looking at potentially doing a season 2 and continuing to do it. And they talked about doing it in sort of a 24-esque way where every season there's sort of a new villain, a new problem, a new threat. So they develop season 1, they resolve the threat of that, but they leave a few plot threads dangling with the intention of season 2. But as it's getting towards the end of production on season 1, no season 2 renewal. Panic, panic, panic. We close off all the plots. Then they get a season 2 anyway. Season 2 is ordered. They make season 2. They put out season 2. Season 3 and 4 are ordered together as one block. Now, this is not as uncommon as people might think because, generally speaking, at the time, a series of a television show was 20-odd episodes anyway. So it was actually a little weird the first 2 seasons of 12 episodes were not ordered together. And when season 2 was ordered, it was sort of ordered as the back half of season 1 rather than actually as a season 2, strictly speaking. So it makes a lot more sense that when they ordered season 3, or book 3 in the case of Korra, they also ordered book 4. They ordered 20-odd episodes and gave them their budget. So it appears, and there isn't a lot of information about this, and it's really, really hard to verify, but it does appear that book 3 and book 4 were produced pretty much in tandem. Now, it's weird because the various studios that were involved have talked a bit about production on season 3, but have not talked about production on season 4, and I think there's a reason for that. But we have literal dates. Like, we know that book 3 was officially completed, and production was done on the 3rd of June 2014. We do not have a date for when production on season 4 was completed, but it started airing October that same year. So it must have been finished sometime between June 3rd and October, because that's when they started airing it. So we know 3 and 4 were basically produced alongside each other. So Nickelodeon, obviously, go into as season 3 is being produced, season 2 is airing. They were already worried about the show from minute 1, which is why they were so hesitant to do that back order for season 2, because they were concerned about the female protagonist, the dark content of the show maybe not really sitting neatly on Nickelodeon the way it did with Avatar, which was a lighter show. And obviously, it's a perpetually online audience, the Legend of Korra audience. They grew up with Avatar. They were a bit older now. They were a very Tumblr sort of crowd. So from Nickelodeon's perspective, when season 3 starts to air, their plan was probably initially to put season 4 out either early the next year or at the same time a year later. They just had it in the can because they produced them together. But the ratings aren't great. And not only are the ratings not great, then we have that whole issue with several of the episodes being leaked. So we have a show that's airing in the middle of in a later time slot, but it's still a bit dark for Nickelodeon's usual audience. Ratings that are falling, partly probably because some people probably weren't thrilled with season 2, which is understandable, or the show in general had fallen off. But also because episodes are being leaked, more of the audience were probably turning to nick.com to watch it anyway. The thing that happened around this time of people switching to on-demand viewing rather than live viewing. And suddenly, Nickelodeon's choice to pull this season, mid-season, from airing starts to make a lot more sense. So mid-season...
Yeah, it's kind of undeniable that, to see their thinking.
Exactly, and especially when you've got the sort of Mexican Nickelodeon website Mundo Nick, which I'm glad I got another excuse to talk about, putting out 4 of the episodes like a month early, like in June, and that probably really hurt ratings. So that didn't help. Already, I can see Nickelodeon sort of panicking and going like, let's just get this out. Let's just wash our hands of this show. And then, and look, the one thing that's talked about a lot, and I was not able to verify this, which is why I didn't talk about it a huge amount, and that's what I was just saying there. But here's the thing: a lot of people have claimed Nickelodeon did not promote this show, like almost at all, ever, on the channel or in ads and stuff. And I think when this series finished in August, I found articles from September of that year being like, guess what? Season 4 is coming next month. Shrug, with no explanation as to why. And it's also worth noting that Nickelodeon did not put out like a press release explaining why they were taking it off television, by the way, during this season either. I should clarify. They didn't do that.
That's shitty.
They
should. Yeah, that's not thinking of the fans.
No. And then dumping a season with no promotion, because here's the thing, right? I can't prove how much or how little they promoted season 3 of this show. Maybe in the months leading up to it, there was tons of stuff. What I can tell you with certainty is if they decided suddenly we're just starting to air season 4 a month after the end of season 3, that they won't have had a lot of time to do any promotion for season 4. I can tell you that with certainty. Because there's physically not much time. So it feels to me like that when they panicked midway through season 3 about the show in general, they'd already produced 3 and 4 and they just went, fuck it. Let's go completely digital and let's just blast them out. And when season 3 finishes, we'll wait 4 weeks and then we'll throw out season 4. Let's just clear our hands of this show completely. That is from what I've been able to put together what I think occurred. Some of that is speculation. Some of that is just based on what we physically know happened. Like, I don't think anyone can look at season 3 finishing in in August, and season 4 starting in October, and not go, they were definitely just like throwing this out. Like, you'd normally put time between the two shows in order to build up and do press and stuff. Yeah, it's all very. It's all really shitty, but that's the best, to the best of my ability, that's what I've been... And there's so little about it. So little information about it. I found articles talking about the announcement that season 4 was coming sooner, but no one asking why. Which breaks my brain.
Well, to your memory, were people talking about it on, forums and stuff like that?
Yeah, I don't recall, because I was completely thrown even last week to discover that they aired so close together, but I remember the moving to digital release situation. Yeah, which is brutal. Yeah, and I even found like old Tumblr posts, looking into this, of people reacting and being like, the show is going online. Does that mean it's cancelled? What's happening? And like, obviously, I don't even think people knew season 4 was basically finished at this point. So there was concern and panic and fear, and I remember that. I don't remember that then season 4 got dumped a month later, or at least started airing on nick.com a month later. But I do remember them moving it to digital and it being not a fun moment for the fandom. So yeah, I don't know. I've got very mixed feelings about the whole situation, and I don't think Nickelodeon handled it very well. It doesn't sound like they did a really good job promoting it, but it also sounds like they kind of were a bit scared to promote it. I feel like they were worried about some of the darker material in the show. And I think, because season 1 does end with a murder-suicide, to be fair. So, like, let's not, let's not mince words here. That's pretty heavy. as the stuff goes. So yeah,
it's certainly not commonplace for children's cartoons,
right? And certainly wouldn't have sat right in Avatar, Last Airbender, for example. So yeah, this is the trivia section. Technically,
it didn't particularly sit right in Korra. I think you could make that argument if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think you could absolutely make that argument. Yeah, 100%. We talked about it at the time. I don't mind the show growing up with the audience, and I don't mind the show going darker because we are dealing with older characters. But yeah, it was certainly Nickelodeon had cold feet about this show from minute one. They were concerned about the female protagonist. They were concerned about the tone. I mean, that is evidenced in their behaviors. The fact it got essentially 2 seasons or 4 books is sort of a miracle, if I'm being honest. And we have to be very grateful that the show does indeed get an ending.
It's especially when you contextualize that as more than the original show got.
Well, funnily enough, it's not really. I mean, the number of episodes is less in the end.
In terms of seasons, I appreciate the original show had more episodes because it was 22 episode seasons, but
yeah. I think this show ends up getting 50-ish episodes, and I think the original Avatar had 60-odd. So yeah, it is amazing that it got 2 renewals of the season 2 renewal it got at some point during its production of season 1, and then this season 3-4 renewal that it got at a later date, and then they completed their 52 episode sort of order. But it's really interesting. I don't know. So that's so trivia. This week's episode is the first episode that didn't air on television. That is what we're getting to, and that I think is sort of what happened. But it's if anyone knows more or has information or any articles I couldn't uncover, because I really did look. I spent a lot of time trying to research this, and there was every article from that time frame, those dates I found about this, just said it was happening. Oh, Korra isn't airing on TV anymore. No explanation as to why. Oh, season 4 is coming sooner than you think. No explanation as to why. No one asking the questions of, well, why is this happening? Just speculation and fear and that sort of stuff. I the comment sections of these articles, people being like, well, wait a minute, why is season 4 coming in a month? I'm excited, great, but why? Why is this? Why so soon? What's happening?
But the fact that none of the people reporting it, none of the media sites, the fact that nobody writing the articles was asking the question is telling on the show's permeation of pop culture. And I think that's grown over time. I've heard Korra talked about a lot on on online shows, on online pop culture shows. Korra's come up a bunch. So I think it definitely had an audience and had a passionate one, but I don't think it permeated quite the way that Avatar did. And the fact that nobody was asking those questions is a sign of that, maybe.
Yeah, and again, if anyone listening to this has better research than I am, which by the way is all of you, can track down more information or quotes about it, anything, I would love to hear and see more. But I really wasn't able to to sort of track down anything more concrete other than the sort of initial just confirmations of what was happening, and I feel like. Because I was expecting to at least find interviews with Mikey and Bri, about what happened here. But, I couldn't even find quotes from them. And, God, when we were talking about what happened between Season 1 and Season 2, we were able to identify... They did several interviews with, the Wall Street Journal and, other sources that we were able to dig up that helped us get to the bottom of it. But nothing here that I could find. So, please, if oh, wait a second. Wait a second. Hold on. Creators of Legend of Korra explain the show's not cancellation. Okay, wait a sec. Let me very quickly see what they said.
You literally found
here.
An article.
Sorry?
Have you literally found an article, as we've been talking?
Yeah, I think I have. Well, let's just. I'm just going to quickly see what they say. So obviously, this is from Brian Konietzko, Michael DiMartino began the okay. So this is a report on a panel they did at Comic-Con. The news came yesterday that Book 3 of Legend of Korra was being pulled from Nickelodeon's channel to air online. So, of course, the creators of the show had to address it at their Comic-Con panel this morning, which they did before moving on to celebrate the show. Wow. Okay. So, let's see. This isn't about Season 4, but it is about why they moved it to a different from the television, from TV to airing.
Yeah.
So obviously there's been a big shake-up. We wanted to address that quickly, but we don't want to take up too much time because we're here to have fun and we have stuff you guys haven't seen yet. But pulling it off channel and moving it digitally exclusively is part of a huge sea change in the whole industry. I'm sure you've seen articles about cable numbers and streaming and companies doing their own content and all that sort of stuff. So obviously we're in the middle of a huge change and things have changed for us since we did Avatar. And then when we came back, and when Book 1 of Korra came out, it did pretty good on TV, but its online presence was insane. Not only the chatter from all the fans, but the actual numbers in terms of digital downloads and streaming, it's been huge. And as the show's gone along, by Book 2, the numbers in digital streaming greatly outweighed the channel's ratings. He continued to say it's where it belongs, but critiqued the way the announcement was made. It's no secret Avatar, especially Korra, is not typical Nickelodeon fare, so they've had a hard time fitting it into their programming, but basically the Book 2 finale, the numbers were insane when they streamed it, when it went on nick.com. It was the biggest event they had that year, and that showed digital downloads for that season were amazing. And as you've seen, not so much on the channel. So this is just part of this shift. It's definitely caught us by surprise. It wasn't necessarily done in the smoothest way, and that was upsetting many of you and us as well. So we're moving over to digital. It's actually a plan that was in place earlier, and it changed course and then went back in a bit of a messy way. But thanks for sticking with us. It won't affect the show or what stories we're telling. We've already written the scripts. We finished all pre-production. We're just doing post, and Studio Mir is finishing animations. Other than that, other than it not being on Nickelodeon's main channel, nothing is changing. You get to see it, which is the important thing.
So what damage control in that, isn't there?
Yeah, very interesting. That's a really interesting comment. So to break that down slightly, I think what I'm implying, what I'm taking from that is that there was potentially a plan for season 4 to go digital anyway, but maybe they panicked mid-season 3 and pulled the trigger on that earlier mid-season, and that's what caused a lot of the panicking.
Yeah, that's certainly how that reads. Yeah, but also it's also very executive producer speak, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like, oh no, it was always the plan, and the reason is this, and it's it's because you guys are so good, and the online numbers. Whew, do you know what I mean? I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying the language does also can be read as executive producer damage control or showrunner damage control. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I mean, he's very clear here at the end. This is the part that that I thought was most interesting. It's actually a plan that was in place earlier, and it changed course and then went back in a bit of a messy way. But thanks for sticking with us. And I think as well, actually, Korra is not typical Nickelodeon fare, and they've had a kind of hard time fitting it into their programming. That also backs up what I was talking about earlier about the tone of the show too. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that absolutely sounds like an acknowledgement of that, for sure.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, from what I can tell, the relief of that is that they haven't contradicted, I don't think, anything that I was able to sort of figure out from the information I did have. That kind of backs up what I was already talking about, but it's nice to hear it from the actual creators. I do agree there's an element of damage control on that, and putting people at ease because they just found out their show is not airing on television anymore, which will have seemed at the time, and even now, that looks like not exactly a great move of support from Nickelodeon. But yeah, there you go. I cannot believe I just stumbled across that, like mid-episode. But there you go.
Nice. What?
Yeah.
What's the other trip?
Yeah. Sorry. This is the first episode of the Avatar franchise to only be released digitally during the respective book's initial run. Wait, what? During the respective book's initial run. But if it's the... Oh, so it doesn't air on television prior to the book finishing, and this is the first episode that did that. Okay, yeah, that's the same information. I don't know who wrote that trivia and why, but okay, fine, thank you. I got so distracted by trying to figure out what happened that trivia snuck in. I would have nixed that if I'd had a bit more focus on the rest of the trivia. Korra's gesture towards the tavern patrons recalls a similar gesture made by Katara and Sokka to the two teenagers in The Blind Bandit. One of the storyboard artists for Mako and Bolin's fight with Minghua and Gazan was Yoon Young-ki, the animation director for the Last Airbender's original unaired pilot episode. There was like a 10-minute pilot episode for Last Airbender. We never really covered it on here, but it was sort of just like a proof of concept. So the director for that, or the animation director for that, storyboarded the fight between Mako Bolin and the Red Lotus from this episode. That's cool.
Cool.
And then
Nice.
Final piece of trivia is Korra's appearance while muzzled and restrained in a straitjacket is designed to resemble Hannibal Lecter from Silence of the Lambs. So there you go.
There we go. Well, we've done listener feedback. So, I guess where can the people find us, Daniel?
Well, they can find us in a few different places, Chris. Of course, they could head over to patreon.com/nothingbutstatic, where they can support the show with as little as $1 a month, and they get episodes 1 week ahead of their normal release. So if you want to hear us discussing next week's episode, Long Live the Queen, right now, then you can go do that. Of course, the other ways to support us, all the usual stuff. Find us on whatever platform we have content on and like it, interact with it, comment on it. Feel free to leave a comment. Of course, if you have feedback, to go into the feedback from last series, or give me that feedback as it has been recently redubbed, as we covered earlier this episode, you could do that by heading over to the either doing it on the Patreon or doing it on the YouTube channel, or if you're on the Patreon, that gives you access to the Discord where you can leave comments there. Other ways to support us, of course, is liking and reviewing on the various audio platforms that we're available on. So on iTunes and what's the other one? Spotify, or whatever podcast platform you use. There's usually some sort of review system. Head over and nudge that. That gives us lots of that gives us more algorithm. I love just a bit more. Give me more algorithm. Delicious algorithm. And then we just gobble up all that algorithm, please. And then, of course, the other way you can support us is if you tell a friend. If you've got a friend who likes Avatar, nudge them. Say, hey, there's a podcast you might like. And if, of course, like me, anyone that would potentially be interested in that, one of those people that's just like, oh, I don't do podcasts. I can't concentrate. I don't listen to them. Then you don't have anyone to tell. That's fine. Just keep listening yourself. Your Avatar loving friends don't have to be on board. That's okay. We appreciate your support.
Exactly. We're incredibly grateful that you are on board.
Yeah. So keep listening. That also supports what we do. Of course, you can always head over to launchlinks.io/u/Raphodraws to support Rapho, who supplies that brilliant piece of art that we use as our key art for this podcast. But I think, other than supporting Rapho and their brilliant artwork, I think I covered everything. I made that quicker than usual because I've realised how much we went on about the the production element of this. I just saw the time.
That's all good. It was interesting stuff.
Yeah, I know. I just looked and was like, did we just waste 20 minutes talking about that stuff? Yes, we did. So.
Oh yeah, we definitely did that, but it was interesting stuff. I think you're fine.
Yeah. Well, but again, and I stand by this. If anyone knows more or has links to other articles where it's discussed in any kind of detail, I would love to hear about it. Clearly there's stuff I might have missed in my research. We discovered that today through a complete accident. And shout out to the Korra wiki, Avatar.fandom, which had on the bottom of the Stakeout page. Oh, excuse me, my hay fever kicking in. On the bottom of the Stakeout page, they had a bunch of links, which is where I clocked as references that article from IO9, creators of Legend of Korra explain shows, not cancellation, retrieved on July 26th, 2014. I would never, because I wasn't trying to do research while we were talking about it. I wasn't like Googling frantically for more information. I'd given up, and then that link is just at the bottom of the wiki. Really helpful. So 10 points to the guys at the avatar.fandom.com/wiki, because that was super useful. Thank you. Yeah, that's everything for this week. Thanks everyone for listening. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you in a week's time when we sit down to review Long Live the Queen.